And what I thought I want to talk about is simplicity. And what got me thinking about simplicity is, as some of you know, I'm also doing some writing on eco dharma, eco intimacy. And yesterday, a lot of what I was writing about had to deal with simplicity. And in many ways, simplicity is the cure for so many of the ills that we are experiencing in the world today. You know, we can talk about whether consumerism and depletion of resources and all of the ecological sequelae of that are a macro problem or a micro problem, right? And the micro people say, well, it's the big corporations, it's government, it's not all of us. And the micro people say, no, it's all of us because somebody's buying the stuff. You know, corporations don't produce stuff unless we buy it. And of course, it's not neither of those polarity, right? This is sort of Hegelian, right? It's dialectical. Neither of those polarities true. It's really the synthesis of both things. Big industries creating the demand and us making the purchases. And that's true in every aspect of our lives today. Our lives are so complicated, aren't they? You know, virtually nothing is simple. And if you really haven't experienced enough complication, try simplifying. That in itself is not an easy thing to do, right? It's like it's just going against the tide. So I think that simplification is a very important concept, and a concept that we all need to introduce into our lives. And that's going to mean something different to each and every one of us, because we're all at different places in our lives, different ages, different economic statuses, lots of different ways, you know, in which we're impacted. So this process of simplification needs to be very idiosyncratic. We all need to start from where we are, and we all start at a different place. And we all need to kind of work at it at the rate that we can with the resources that we have. And we're all going to change and progress at a different place. Now, I'm not just talking about simplification of physical aspects of our lives, the goods we consume and so on, but, you know, our mental aspects as well, right? This is fundamental to Zen. As I see it, Zen is remarkably simple. And yet because we're such complicated creatures, we like to make it complicated. And that got me thinking this morning about one of my favorite teachers who I haven't talked about in a very long time, Bankei. People familiar with Bankei? Some are, most of you are, huh? Okay, so, you know, D.T. Suzuki rated Bankei right up there with Hakuin and Dogen as among the greatest Zen teachers in Japan. And he was very unconventional, to say the least. He went out into the countryside and he taught ordinary people. He didn't have a big temple someplace where he taught the wealthy, the educated. He taught farmers and shopkeepers, very ordinary people. And he used ordinary language. The things that Bankei said were completely comprehensible. And I think that he saw that as essential to his teaching, that he could talk with anyone, anywhere, and they would understand what he was saying. And that allowed him to bring Zen to ordinary people in a way that perhaps no other teacher had done. And so when he taught out in the countryside, hundreds and hundreds of people would gather to hear what he had to say. Well, what did he have to say? Bankei's essential teaching was about the unborn mind. The unborn mind. And I'm going to read a little thing here. I can bring it up. So this is a quote from Bankei. Not a single one of you people at this meeting is unenlightened. Right now, you're all sitting before me as Buddhas. Each of you received the Buddha mind from your mothers when you were born and nothing else. This inherited Buddha mind is beyond doubt unborn, with a marvelously bright, illuminative wisdom. In the unborn, all things are perfectly resolved. So this was the core of Bankei's teaching of the unborn Buddha mind. And he, in fact, said that if you were able to spend a month residing in that unborn mind, that you would be fully realized. Well, when I first read that about 40 years ago, I said, I can do that. About 8 seconds later, I realized that that was impossible. But the principle stands. The principle stands. We have it. This is Dogen said this. I quoted Dogen just a week or two ago, right? Dogen talked about we are already enlightened. And here's Bankei saying the same thing. We are born with the Buddha mind, the unborn Buddha mind. It comes to us from our mothers. And so what do we need? What are we doing? What's all this practice about? Why do we need it? Well, in a certain sense, we don't. Except that we make everything complicated. We complicate our lives, we complicate our Zen. We put layer and layer and layer of cognitive schemas and separations upon realities so that in the end, reality is so distorted that we don't see it even when it's right before our very eyes. And Bankei is saying, you don't have to do anything special. You don't have to have anything special. You don't have to go you don't have to go to the Himalayas to get this. We all have this from the moment that we're born. And we all have moments of clarity where we experience and understand that. Moments of absorption, of complete presence, of non-separation. Whether that happens in our zazen, whether that happens rollerblading, I don't know, reading a book, all of these things, But when we fully engage with life and we don't create separation and we don't create a separate identity and we don't create a whole host of problems, we don't create a whole host of ideas. There it is. The fog lifts and it's right there. And it's been right there in front of our eyes our entire lifetime. And I'm willing to bet that every one of you has experienced this, although you may not have recognized it as such. There's nothing to attain. We already have it. We are all perfect and complete. No matter how big a schmuck we are perfect and complete. That's also something that makes it hard for us to understand. And, what, me? I'm such a jerk. I make so many mistakes. Blah, blah, blah. I stole candy when I was 9. I don't, we have all of the reasons that we are unworthy, undeserving, not spiritually strong enough or something like that. And that's not even part of the equation. That's yet another fiction that we create that separates us from this very simple reality. In a certain sense, what the process of Zen about is getting out of our own way. Stopping obscuring and obstructing our original nature, our unborn mind, our Buddha nature, whatever we want to call it. Now, of course, while that's simple, it's not easy, and it takes practice. And that's why we practice, right? It's not because we don't have it. It's not good, but it is so fragile, particularly at first, that we need to practice. We need to awaken. We need to come into this moment as fully as we can. We need to engage with this reality. And when we do that, certain amazing things happen. We tend to see our problems as part of our external reality. There's me, and then there's my problems. And that we see the problems as external, as entities that have their own being. But all the problems, every single one, exists only one place. Right here. Right here. We create them. Very often we manufacture. If we don't have enough, we make a few more. Where do they exist? They exist right here. If we're living in the unborn mind, we don't have problems. We have realities. And there's a big distinction. And we have the opportunity to work with and live with and transform those realities. That's a very positive, hopeful process. We're able to let go of the things that are overwhelming us and just deal. In AA, there's an expression of doing the next right thing. That's kind of a description of living in recovery, is just do the next right thing. Right? Very simple. You don't have to know what the 15th right thing is. Just the next one. What's right in front of our eyes? What do we need to do? Now, the right thing, that's, in Zen, we'd be I am a little uncomfortable with that language, because we don't really believe there's a right thing. But there is a next thing. There's something that we need to do. The baby's crying. We need to pick it up and hold it. The dog is hungry. We need to bring it a bowl of food. In our lives, there's almost always something that we need to do, the next thing. And the next thing, and the next thing, and onward. We need to take care of our business. We need to take care of our lives. We need to take care of the beings that surround us. If the plants need water, then the next right thing is water the plants. Very simple. If we're tired, the next right thing is take a nap. If we're hungry, the next right thing is go eat a meal. Very simple. Now, I'm not saying that we should never plan things, that we should never think about things. But that's something very different. Analytically solving some question or problem is a very different thing from analyzing our lives constantly. And what I believe Bankei would say, as with others, is that unborn Buddha mind, we know what the right thing to do is. Instinctively, intuitively, we respond in the right way. We don't gum it up with all our coulda, shoulda, woulda stuff, with our guilt and our shame and our fear and our anger. Right? None of those exist in that place of unborn mind. And so we're able to think and act with much greater clarity, much more appropriately. And here's another quote from Bankei. Suddenly, while at the very depths, it struck me like a thunderbolt that I had never been born and that my birthlessness could settle any and every matter. This seemed to be my satori. The birthless Buddha mind can cut any and every knot. To live in a state of non-birth is to attain Buddhahood. For the moment you have begun to realize this fact, you are a living Buddha. From the moment you have begun to realize this fact, you are a living Buddha. That's a hard pill to swallow. But again, Bankei reinforcing this idea, it's not something we become, it's not something we attain. It's something that we are and that we can express in every moment. And Bankei encourages us to do that. Remain in that unborn Buddha mind. And the more we practice, the more accessible that is to us. You know, that's one of the things that Zazen brings us, is that ability to kind of let go, right? Letting go. That's the gateway. That's the gateway to the unborn mind, is just letting go of whatever it is. That's what we do when we're sitting, right? That's what we do when we're counting breaths or doing shikantaza, or when we're doing the koan and we let go of anything that isn't the koan. So that's it. Simplify. Simplify our practice, and then allow that to simplify our lives. What do we need? Sitting here right now. We're all perfect and complete. We don't need anything. But in a very short period of time, we'll start needing things, wanting things, missing things, right? We need certain things for biological survival. We know that. even that, look at the life of the Buddha. One meal a day, whatever people put in his bowl when he went out to beg that in the morning. One single robe to cover his body. I mean, that's part of his teaching, part of his example was extreme simplicity. The Buddha essentially didn't have any possessions beyond his bowl and his robe. And the way the robes were obtained was to go to the charnel grounds and cut scraps of cloth off the bodies and wash them and dye them and sew them together. And that's how you got a robe. So you needed a robe for modesty. And I don't know if you ever needed it for protection from the elements in India, but certainly for some modesty. And so they went and they found a way to absolutely bring that to the minimum, to the most simple place. They got discarded cloth from dead bodies and made robes. Might sound a little bit macabre to our sensibilities, but so that's not going to happen, right? We're not going to do that. We're not going to all go out and get robes and bowls and beg in the streets. You know, it's interesting. When I was living in New Hampshire, there was a Buddhist group there. I forget whether they might have been Pure Land. I don't know, and I don't remember now. And they were doing that. They were going into the streets of Peterborough, New Hampshire, on like Friday evenings and begging. And I have to say that struck me as pretty weird. I don't think we're going to bring back begging for our meals anytime soon. But again, therefore, you know, the Buddha taught us the middle way. Where's the middle way? The middle way perhaps between having a single bowl and a single robe and having a 3,000 square foot house and a 3-car garage and a snowmobile and a 4-wheeler and, you know, on and on and on and on, the things that people possess. And we need, you know, we each need to find what that middle way is for us. But no matter what, we can simplify. Okay, enough said. Thank you.
Peter, I had a couple of thoughts while you were speaking. First, when you started talking about simplifying, it reminded me a number of years ago, the magazine came out, which was called Real Simple, and it was all about simplifying. And as I was in the grocery store and checking out, it was right there, and I paged through and there are all these complicated articles about how to simplify. And then, of course, you have to buy a lot of things so that you can simplify too. Uh, so I thought that was a sort of interesting way our culture simplifies. Uh, and another thing that you said is we don't see what's right in front of us. And I know that there have been times when I have occasional glimpses of, oh, this is what Peter's been talking about all this time, and it's so simple, but I lost it. And then I lose it again. And I don't think that for a while till something else brings me to, oh, yeah, Peter said this. And the last thing that I wanted to say was uh, when you were talking about we don't have problems, uh, but we know the right thing to do. Um, and sometimes when I have a something which feels to me like a monumental decision, I try to go deep inside and listen for something that's in me to give me guidance. And and when you talked about that, the next thing you went to was we just need to let go, let go, let go. So I guess there's a question there. Um, if if one is having to do a lot of soul searching for solve a problem, do you let go or do you go deep and try to catch on to something?
Yes.
I should have known.
I don't know. I mean, look, if I'm trying to figure out how to join two pieces of wood together, letting go probably isn't going to get me there, right? Although, unless it's maybe I had some preconceived idea that was wrong and I need to let go of that. I need to get wood joinery strategies and glues. And, I'm going to go online. I'm going to research all those things and say, okay, I can make this kind of a dovetail joint and blah, blah, blah. And Elmer's glue, right? So it's completely appropriate to the circumstances. But if I'm trying to appreciate a tree, I'm probably not going to go get a dendrology textbook. So it's different. You mentioned that thing about noticing, and a couple of nights ago, my friend Aaron and I, we recorded another. I keep calling them podcasts, but they're not. If they have visual, Gary, what are they really called?
I don't know. They're not podcasts, though.
Okay, an unpodcast, and we recorded an unpodcast, but we were interviewing Gary Lawless. Do folks know Gary Lawless? Some of you. Among other things, he's been the poet laureate of the state of Maine. He's published some wonderful books of poetry, and he owns the Maine Coast Bookstore down in Brunswick, if any of you have encountered that place. And he's a crazy guy. He's wonderful. He's so crazy. And in the 70s, he hitchhiked from Maine to California to hang out with Gary Snyder and Alan Watts and that whole crew. And he had these remarkable experiences out there. But he's also, I mean, I could just go on with his virtues, but he's also an amazing naturalist because he's an amazing observer. I told him he was a scientist. He didn't like that word. I probably should have used the word naturalist because he pays attention to things in such a meticulous way. It's wonderful. But one of the stories he told was that that he used to take people on a walk, a kind of, I don't know if it was like an art, poetry, nature walk kind of thing down in that area of the mid coast. And one week they had somebody come who was a naturalist who talked with them about the mosses and the lichens and the fungi. And all of a sudden, this whole new world opened. And he said the next walk was the slowest one that they ever had because everybody was looking down and they were fascinated by the moss and the lichens and the fungi, right? So this is, it just speaks a lot to our quality of attention, you know. You know, Deborah, were you saying, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just, I went visiting friends in Massachusetts this week. And one of them, Barbara, is a photographer. And she's taking a class online. And I asked her what excited her about the photography. And she said, looking through the camera, she notices things that she wouldn't otherwise notice. And that's what is so special to her about the whole process of taking photographs. And I think that that's her way of slowing down and just appreciating what's in front of her.
Yeah, thank you. You know that Dido Luri Roshi was a very accomplished photographer. He was a student of Minor White, who, if you know photography, Minor White is one of the greats. And Dido was kind of up in that league, and he used the camera as a Zen tool, both in his personal life, but also in retreats. He had retreats where people came with their cameras, and that's what they did is just recorded their experience in, you know, but using the camera as a tool to help them see, you know, and yeah, and so that's what happened with Gary. Gary, I'm gonna sing his praises a little while longer. He has a book out called Kara Buddhism. And poems, a collection of poems called Kara Buddhism. But the origin of that was that when he was at Gary Snyder's, he met a very elderly Japanese man who was at that point essentially a wandering Zen mendicant, just traveling around the world, just sort of wandering. And he was truly without possessions and everything. But his backstory was that he was the sole survivor of a kamikaze squadron, that he was the mechanic and everybody in the squadron died except him. And he was totally confused and totally disillusioned, began wandering the world and practicing Zen. Interesting guy. And so at some point, that he and Gary became friends. Gary Wallace, they left Gary Snyder's, they traveled around, they went down to Mexico, blah, blah, blah. Then Gary came back to Maine, and I think his name, I don't want to mess up his name, but I think it's Nanau. Came back, called him up one day, and he was down in someplace hot, and he said, Gary, let's go to, I want to see icebergs. Let's go see icebergs. So Gary got him a ticket to come to Maine. He flew him up to Maine, and they got in the car, which I think was a Geo Metro. If any of you have had a Geo Metro, as I have it, it's one of the great cars of all times. And they drove to the northern tip of Newfoundland and spent several weeks there. And it was May, I think, which in northern tip of Newfoundland is not springtime. And they hung out with the caribou, the moose, and the icebergs for several weeks. They just camped up there. And had this incredible experience. I mean, to hear Gary talk about, essentially talking about the icebergs as, and the caribou and the moose all as sentient beings, it's really quite wonderful. And so he came to we had a workshop at Treetop. We had a day-long workshop. I don't know, 10 years ago now, maybe longer. Did you come to that, Deborah? When we had the Eco Day? Yeah, I thought so. And so Gary came to that and told the story, but where he and I connected, because I've also had a very, very powerful experience with caribou. And I've made several what I would call pilgrimages to visit the caribou and in Quebec. So anyway, Gary and I had a sort of strange connection around cariboudism. a wonderful concept. So if you have run across his stuff, I encourage you to take a look at it.
Where can we find your unpodcast?
Oh, we've unpublished our unpublic podcast. We haven't published them yet. We haven't, whatever you do. It's probably not called publish. I don't know what it's called, but we've got several ready, and we're trying to kind of decide on what the best platform is going to be and how to get the word out and all of that. So when it happens, I will definitely let you know, let everybody know.
Um, I was very struck by the idea of simplicity, but also this, how we complicate things through our own kind of machinations of observations, and we think about things. And one thing I've been kind of thinking about is how it's just I screw up so much in life, and not accepting that as it just then creates more complications. And sometimes I screw up just by benign neglect, and the consequences come and the chaos ensues and you have to deal with it. But I find myself just really working on accepting that fucking up quite a bit, and that is part of life and part of the path. And even when you simplify things, those things go wrong. And so even, here we are living in this, we sold our house, all our stuff is in a 10 by 12 storage unit to kind of make things as simpler as possible, living on a boat. And still it doesn't feel a lot simpler, even though technically it is. So just some observations.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, well, you're absolutely, in another sense, you're absolutely right. Simplicity is not simple, right? And everything requires attention. I think it's just sort of it's the way that we respond to it that we have control over, the way that we allow it to affect our lives that we have control over it. And in this group, we're all at different stages of life. We all have complications, but they're different ones, appropriate to our stage of life and our immediate circumstances. And it never, that those circumstances don't go away. Whether or not those circumstances are a problem, that's the thing that we have control over, right?
I mean, this sounds kind of shallow, but you do these things thinking things are going to be better. It's going to be simpler. I'm going to be able to do all the little things that I pursue Zen more, have more options, more time for things but I'm still me, I'm still there. I didn't really change me particularly doing that exercise of simplifying. It's something deeper.
Well, who we are is part of our original nature, right? And you're right, and that's like at the beginning of training, of practice, you are who you are, and at the end of training and practice, you are who you are, right? That fundamentally doesn't change, and all that screwing up doesn't change. You know, I remember in my sort of growing up with Zen, there was this idea that Zen teachers were perfect. There was this idea that they never made mistakes. And that's absolutely true, by the way. Because you only make a mistake when you say you've made a mistake, right? It's only here. So, but we all fuck up, we all screw up, we all make mistakes. That's humanity. And Zen doesn't eliminate our humanity. It makes us more human. But hopefully what it helps us to do is relinquish some of the judgment that comes with that, to be comfortable in our own skin, to be comfortable with who we are, with all of our flaws. And it doesn't mean we don't try to be better. Of course we try to be better. We try, try, whether it's we're going to try to sit more, whether we're going to try to, I don't know, spend more time with our partners, or, we're always, having aspirations to do better is important. But at the end of the day, we're never going to be perfect. And so we need to become okay with that. So you're right. I mean, that's part of the process, of being able to live within our own skin, is being, there's a wonderful book I mentioned from time to time, The Spirituality of Imperfection. And it's sort of AA flavored, but it's not an AA book per se. But it draws on a lot of spiritual traditions. Zen being one of them, Hasidic Jewish writings, and the Desert Fathers, kind of the wisdom traditions. But it's all about, which the idea that I love is that our spirituality arises out of the imperfect beings that we are and we will always be. Right? There's a saying in AA, we seek spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. I love that saying. We seek spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Spiritual perfection is unattainable by us humans. So part of this whole thing is coming to peace with who we are, trying to do better, and being perfectly okay with the fact that we're not. But if we think about it, the extent to which we are self-judgmental is a big part of the complexity. Again, that's a piece that we bring into our lives that isn't, not our fault. It's something that our culture, our parents, all of these forces have imposed on us. Expectations. That we've internalized. And so therefore our cup is always half empty. Because we can't meet all those unreasonable expectations. And so a big part of our work, both psychologically and spiritually, is to let go of the expectations. Be who we are. It's a wonderful aspect. For those of you who have not tried aging yet, I highly recommend it. Because it's a really wonderful way to come up against our limitations and our shortcomings every day. Getting out of bed is a struggle. Oh, who thought? And so, but that's what it, I think that's what aging well is, constantly adjusting. That today, the who I am today is not the who I am yesterday, and it's not the who I'm going to be tomorrow. And it's constantly changing, and lots of those are things that I don't like, and I have absolutely no control over them. But that's true of all of our lives. It just becomes a little starker relief when the bones don't move.
Some of the guilt I feel as a parent is transmitting that same stuff to my kids. You know, you have to train them to get up, go to school, do all these, and you're kind of, you're laying that same foundation of, you know, societal expectations on them. And I'm like, am I just churning out two more workaholics here? I don't know. You just, you know, but what can you have, you can only do what you can do at that moment. But you know, still, I think, you know, I feel a little guilt about it, but I don't really see any way I could have changed it.
Yeah, well, I think that's all of our dilemma as parents, you know, and if we don't prepare our kids for the expectations of the society, then they're going to be in a different kind of trouble, right? You know, whether they can't support themselves or they can't, you know, so there's some point we have to say, okay, you need to do this. You need to get up in the morning because the society says we get up in the morning, you know, and so on. And you know, I think back in the 70s, we thought we could short circuit that. You had all these dirty little kids running around, running around with nobody paying attention to them, you know. And I don't think, you know, probably Robert has a whole slew of clients who are the are the beneficiaries of that parenting style. You know, but so it's, you know, but again, always we do the best we can with what we have, with what we know. We just do the best we can. I think all parents do the best they can. And, you know, if we step back and say, oh, they did a horrible job, they did awful things. No, they did the best they could. You know, we do the best we can. We try. But we have to be secure in the knowledge that when we've done that, we've done it. We've done enough. We've done all we can. And in working for our own liberation and doing our own practice, we are also creating the model for others, the pathway, you know, and reminding others that such a pathway exists. And that may not even be something that we see in our, you know, neither of my sons practice Zen at all. As far as I know, neither of them have any particular spiritual bent whatsoever. But my hope would be at some point that fact that I had a spiritual practice and that I did certain, you know, would inspire them. I don't want them to follow me, but I want them to be inspired to follow their own path.